Ballistol is the world's most multi-purpose gun oil. Remarkably clean, satisfyingly lubed, protection in every spritz. Ballistol's oil brings life back to your firearm. Primer approved and recommended.
Hello class, I'm your professor for this lesson, Professor Gruffudd. Today we'll be learning about the Japanese Empire's pursuit of a more effective cartridge and a rifle for the same. I am of course talking about the Japanese Type 99 rifle, and especially its 7.7mm cartridge. Now, the original Type 99 was a long infantry pattern along the lines of the previous Type 38, though with some improvements for manufacture. Weighing in just under 9 pounds and with an overall length of 50 inches, this was a very late addition to the list of full-length infantry repeating rifles from around the world. The magazine fits 5 rounds, double stacked and flush fit. Rapid loading is provided via stripper clip. The cartridge was a new 7.7mm, which had actually been the impetus for developing this rifle. For many of you, there will be no surprise when I say that this is really just a modification of the previous Japanese long arm, though we'll need to take 2 steps back to clarify that point. Japan's first smokeless repeater was a sort of commission rifle, with the project run under one Naryakira Arisaka. His name would remain associated with all Japanese bolt-action military rifles, at least in collector circles. In reality, the only influence we see on our rifle today was the adoption of the same bayonet and lug, similar stock profile, and strangely, the ladder sights, mostly. While this Type 30 rifle was a good first attempt, there were some obvious deficiencies. Changes would be made by one Kijiro Nanbu, who had been assigned to the Tokyo Artillery Arsenal and served under Arisaka. Responding to concerns by the Japanese Navy, Nanbu developed what became the Type 35 rifle, adopted by the Navy in 1902. Perhaps best known as an Arisaka Nanbu, this design reduced double feeding, improved protection against gas escape, enlarged the bolt handle, and fitted a sliding dust cover, though this required a separate motion rather than being integrated into the bolt. There were also some features that were not carried forward, like the quadrant rear sight and wraparound handguard. Following the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese Army began to consider the deficiencies of the Type 30 rifle, just as the Navy had done. Now, by this time, Nanbu had become a major and chief of rifle manufacture. He was charged with further improving the Japanese service rifle, something he had frankly already been working on. He had 5 principles for his design. The rifle must be simple to use. It must use a minimal number of parts, it must be rugged, it must be absolutely reliable, and it must be handsome. The last point may seem strange, but he felt that troops were more likely to take better care of an attractive rifle than an unattractive one. It would also inspire more confidence. While Nanbu worked on his rifle, the war sparked concerns about the power of the 6.5mm Japanese Type 30 cartridge. Small bore, bottle-nosed, jacketed, this had been a smokeless high-velocity cartridge intended to provide flat trajectories while weighing less, and thus allowing for more ammunition to be carried into battle. During the Russo-Japanese War, it was pitted against the Russian 7.62mm rimmed rifle cartridge. This was a bulkier design, but was proven to be doing more damage, both in lethality and causing injuries that took longer to heal than those close calls from the 6.5mm. Naturally, at this time, the Japanese Army began to investigate their own larger bore, roughly .30 caliber cartridge. These experiments, however, fizzled out, as at the same time it was realized that modern warfare relied less on long-ranged and powerful rifle cartridges and more on fire support and combined tactics. So the 6.5mm was deemed acceptable for the expected fighting ranges and conditions, though it did receive some upgrading. Converted to Spitzer, it saw the usual lightning, an increase of muzzle velocity, making it an even flatter shooter. It was paired with Nanbu's improved rifle, adopted in 1906, though it was named for the year of its completion, 1905. That was the 38th year of the Meiji Empire. This represents a significant departure from the previous Type 30. While collectors often call it an Arisaka, I don't think that is a fair assessment. It's definitely the work of Nanbu. Now, we've already covered the Type 38 rifle in some detail, however, it has been a while, so it's probably worth our time to take another look, just real quick. Now, the Type 38 is a very long, old-world infantry rifle, and there's a lot we can talk about, like its light two-piece stock, or, well, the fact that it's been relieved here so that it can let water back out, because Japan knew, as a naval power and an island nation, that, yeah, they were going to deal with a lot of moisture. Also, just in the air, humidity is a thing. But these features are minor compared to the refinements that Nanbu made to the action. Now, if we look down from on top, we'll see a nice long dust cover that actually rides with the action. We take this for granted because we're so used to seeing it as collectors, but this dust cover automatically moving with the bolt was an innovation under Nanbu's watch. A dust cover that just simply could be opened and closed independently had also been done under his watch before on the Type 35. We also see that in the Thai Mausers, but this guy is fairly unique to the Type 38, and it was a very smart idea. We see these sort of automatic dust covers being considered more and more in European nations by the end of World War I because, yeah, it turns out it was a really good idea to transport with a cover that you can't lose. So, good job. Now, that's a fairly minor modification in terms of what he really pulled off with the bolt. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this guy out so that we can get the dust cover out of our way. And go ahead and put the bolt back in. And for those of you familiar with military surplus rifles, at this point you're thinking, I'm looking at a Mauser. I have this, left side of the receiver bolt release. I have this full-length extractor for symmetrical front locking lugs. I even have this stabilizing guide lug here on the side. And it is a cock-on-close action for the most part. I will say the camming on this for when you initially open the bolt, it does set back the firing pin. It seems to set it back a little bit more than it needs to, but still almost entirely cock-on-close. What we really depart from the Mauser on this gun is in the considerations that went into this rear safety. Now, this rear cap is the safety, like I just said. It's also a gas check for any failed cases coming back towards the shooter's eye. It fills up everything nicely like the shield that was later added to the Mauser. But this thing from the outside belies how much work it's really doing as one complicated shaped part. Now, before I take this out of the gun, I just want to point out its operation as a safety. You would use the bottom of your palm. It's a little hard to do at this angle on camera, so I'm just going to use my fingertips, but this is not how you would use it in the field. And you would just push this guy in all the way and rotate it over. Now, I struggled a bit with the tip of my hands, but with your palm, it's quite easy to do. Now, the rear of this is also checkered in a radial pattern. We'll get a look at that in a moment when I take it off. That allows for a nice texture so that we can go ahead and push and turn that without any difficulties whatsoever. Actually, I'll just show that to you now. Absolutely gorgeously done. With the bolt out of the rifle, we just have to push and turn, just like setting our safety, until we line up with a groove and it pops on out. From here, this big old combination part, which is actually several pieces welded together and then finally finished, can be set aside. We pull out our firing pin or striker, and then from inside of that we pull out our firing pin spring, and then of course we had our bolt body assembly, which has the extractor semi-permanently attached. You would not remove the extractor in the field. This can rotate about the bolt body because it doesn't rotate when the bolt does in the action. Now, this much, yeah, Mauser. This gets a little weird because the spring's inside instead of wrapped around, and a big reason why is because of this do-everything spud that's going down the center, applying pressure on the spring, but also turning into a side groove in order to lock the safety, and then coming around the other side of the groove in order to go ahead and allow for disassembly. This is ridiculously more simple than the Mauser. It's also a little bit stronger because the Japanese opted to do shallower locking lugs that are wider set. That gives you the same surface area, but without as much risk of shear. So really nice. There's also an out of battery safety, which on the bolt is just this divot here. There's a matching pin inside the trigger group that we'll see later on in this lesson. So by 1906, the Japanese Empire, had settled on a rifle and cartridge that would serve as standard right up until the eve of the Second World War. Behind the scenes, however, there were still concerns, and they became especially acute when it came to machine guns. During the Russo-Japanese War, Japan had made use of the French Hotchkiss chambered for their 6.5mm cartridge. Like the rifle, this had proven somewhat unsatisfactory, though unlike the rifle, machine guns were not expected to simply make do. That small cartridge made it difficult to use specialty loadings like AP, incendiary, or tracer rounds, all of which would become important in the nascent field of aerial combat. We saw a very early aviation gun when we covered the Lewis light machine gun. Iconic for its service in the First World War, the Lewis gun was actually completed before the outbreak of hostilities. Japanese representatives were present at its 1913 demonstration at Bisley in England. In 1915, the Japanese firm Mitsui Basan Kaisha Limited attempted to obtain manufacturing rights or direct procurement of Lewis guns to market to the Japanese armed forces. This effort, however, seems to have fallen flat, perhaps because of the turmoil and demands coming from the Great European War at that time. Now, once that conflict wrapped up, however, Japan was again curious about the Lewis, purchasing them along with aircraft and ships from surpluses after the end of World War I. Much of this was, of course, for the Japanese Navy, which was at the time rapidly expanding use of aircraft. Given the availability and affordability of surplus Lewis and Vickers guns, they chose to standardize on the British .303 rimmed cartridge. This was the Mark VII Spitzer variation, which had been in use during the war. The Japanese Navy would initially buy these abroad, but then cloned it outright, adopting a domestically produced version in 1927 as the Type 87 cartridge. This remained in service with the Navy alone until the end of the Second World War, even allowing them to make use of captured British equipment in that conflict. The Japanese Army, however, did not keep a direct clone of .303. Instead, they opted to make modifications. It was already well known that rimless cartridges fed better in autoloaders than rimmed. However, they did require more consideration for sealing the breech and setting headspace. All the way back in 1919, experiments were conducted on a 7.7 by 58mm rimless cartridge, that 7.7mm being the metric conversion of British .303. Though now the case had changed. Despite our conversation about machine guns, this drawing does come from a document on rifles trials at that time. 100 Type 38 rifles had been converted to the new 7.7mm cartridge and given to the infantry school for field evaluations. Another set of cavalry carbines would also be produced for the cavalry school in 1922. It can be assumed the same was progressing with a machine gun program, like with an eye for universal adoption of one 7.7mm cartridge. The following year saw an agreement on the requirements for the next service rifle, built around this new cartridge. However, all of this work was put on a fairly long pause thanks to an literal earth-shaking event. In 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake devastated the Kanto plain of Japan's Honshu Island. The capital city of Tokyo was practically destroyed, and more than 100,000 people died. For our story today, it also revealed the vulnerability of having almost all arms production centered at the Tokyo Artillery Arsenal. This upheaval stalled any changes that were in planning at the time. Instead, Japanese ordnance took up the matter of decentralizing production. The rifles were, for a time, set aside, and when the matter of 7.7 was taken up again, it seems to have been in greater demand for the automatics first, ultimately resulting in the adoption of two Type 89 machine guns in 1929. The big Type 89 was the Vickers E, which was purchased directly at first, now chambered for a new 7.7mm Japanese cartridge. As you can guess, this was descended from the earlier trials. To improve feed, the rim was reduced down into a semi-rim like the previous 6.5mm rifle cartridge. It sported a copper nickel-clad flat-bottom bullet, and fired from the machine gun, it had a muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second. This was fed to the Vickers, and another gun adopted the same year, the Type 89 flexible Aircraf gun. Now, in the same year that these guns were adopted, another trial was begun on rifles chambered for 7.7mm. Now slightly evolved from where it left off in 1923. 18 prototypes were assembled and tested by the Army Technical Headquarters. While not acceptable for adoption, they provided further data on what would be required in the years to come. In the meantime, the machine gun work was carried on with more gusto. The introduction of the Type 92 heavy machine gun called for a heavier bullet to match, so the Type 89 was adapted. The bullet was made longer, boat-tailed, and the jacketing was also changed to brass. But the case remained the same. This became the standard for another 5 years when the introduction of a new vehicle-mounted magazine-fed machine gun forced yet another change. Appearing in 1937, the Type 97 is loosely a modification of the Czech ZB line of automatics, and it wasn't working well with the semi-rimless cartridge, so a true rimless case was finally adopted. The Type 97, which became the model for our eventual rifle cartridge today, though in machine gun use the bullet was heavier at 203 grains. Alright, it's 1937, the Japanese Army and Navy are using 6.5mm Type 38 bolt-action rifles. The Navy is sticking with a clone of .303 British. The Army has adapted this into a semi-rimless and then truly rimless cartridge. 6.5mm is clearly on the way out, so it's time to finally get those rifles updated. But if we're going to convert them to a new cartridge, is there anything else we can do to make improvements while we're at it? This matter was finally tackled during 1938 with Army Technical Headquarters putting out orders for further research on infantry and cavalry rifles. A series of Type 38s were modified at Kokura Arsenal. Now just to clarify, when the Tokyo Artillery Arsenal was spread out, after the Kanto quake, Kokura inherited the bulk of its rifle manufacture, even taking on the marking once used in Tokyo. Now, testing of these rifles proved encouraging, and the War Department decided to investigate just how many changes they could make on the rifle. By April, they had a must-have list in hand. The weight must be under 8.8 pounds. The rear sight should feature an aperture, which was to be graduated from 100 to 1500 meters. These should have an anti-aircraft element. The stock should be lighter than the previous Type 38. It should use readily available metals, as in no special steel that needed importing or was excessively expensive. It must also be simplified in order to ease manufacture, reducing time and cost. A committee was launched with representatives from the Army Arsenal headquarters and just about every arsenal in the country. The powder arsenal was also included, along with some subcontracting manufacturers. Ultimately, the plan broke into 4 experimental paths. There were 2 categories, rifle and carbine. The No. 1 infantry rifle plan was headed up by the Nagoya Arsenal, which sought to modify and simplify the Type 38. The No. 2 infantry rifle plan was headed by Kokura and experimented with a new breech system that would be far simpler to manufacture. The carbine plans were just differentiated by which existing carbine they were modifying. No. 1 was the Type 44 and No. 2 was the Type 38. Just as a reminder, these were very compact 38-inch long shoulder arms, light and handy, so much so that it will become a problem later. Prototypes on all 4 patterns were finished by October of 1938. We'll leave those carbines for another time. As for the long rifles, they both must have done well enough, but still had some hang-ups because both plans were sent back for another round of prototyping. These were tested again in January of 1939. Now, rifle plan number 2 was dropped as the altered lockwork wasn't felt to be reliable enough despite its easier manufacture. Rifle plan number 1, however, did have some issues with precision and accuracy, though this was found to be the fault of the test ammunition. Number 1 still had a few more recommendations given towards streamlining its production costs. Japanese sources credit most of the work on the No. 1 Nagoya-made rifle to one artillery officer, Iwashita Kenzo. Born in Nagano in 1896, young Iwashita attended the Imperial Japanese Army Academy before going on to officer school and staying for additional education in artillery specifically. He graduated in 1921. He was briefly attached to the 1st Field Heavy Artillery Regiment, however, he would largely spend his time in arms manufacture and development. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a complete list of his accomplishments. However, from what I have read, he seems to have had his fingers in everything from machine guns to antifreeze. When the Type 89 had entered production, he was assigned to the Chigusa factory at Nagoya, where he was asked to work out a 7.7mm rifle. Surprisingly, he was suddenly reassigned to the Kwantung Army, where he worked on mixing antifreeze and oil for their guns. In just over a year, he would actually return to Chickasaw. However, he was at this point put to work on mass production of the Type 89 flexible aircraft machine gun. It wouldn't be until 1937 that he was put back to work on the rifle. His results, of course, we saw as Rifle Plan Number 1. Now, a Colonel Giichi Dogane was in charge of examination of the new rifle, likely responsible for a number of small decisions. Credit for one major change is given to him, however, the inclusion of a chrome-lined barrel. This had been carried over from experiments with what had become the Type 96 light machine gun. Chrome-lined barrels in the bore had provided for a much longer lifespan of the barrels, thanks to its resistance to rust and direct wear. Now, a third round of prototype rifles emerged in May of 1939. After this point, only minor tweaking found its way into what becomes our rifle today. By this time, they had also introduced a short rifle, something between the carbine and the long rifle that I have here, but that's a story for our next lesson. Trials were conducted throughout June at the Army Infantry Testing School. Here the sights were set for 0 of 300 meters, and final decisions were made on the bolt handle, which was practically the same as the Type 38 in the end. Both designs were recommended for adoption in July of 1939. This wasn't officially approved until November of 1940. However, like many other countries, this had been a done deal before that point. Now, the Japanese imperial calendar is based on the rule of Emperor Jinmu, who legendarily founded the nation in 660 BC. That made 1939 the year 2599, and this new rifle became the Model 99, often translated by collectors as Type 99. I, of course, happen to have an example of the Type 99 long rifle right here, so let's get a closer look at it. True to the title of this lesson, this is a long Nambu Type 99 rifle. Now, if we start all the way at the front, we're going to see some improvements over the old basic Type 38. Some of these improvements were carried over to Type 38 as well, but they're new for this gun and not included in the original 38, so let's just walk them down. We have a nice front sight protector with wing-a-lings and a driftable front sight set down inside. We also have an improved reinforced front barrel band with a couple screws set through it. This lug here still fits the original Type 30 bladed bayonet that we found on the previous two rifles. We have a cleaning rod, which is now released with actually a push button right there. We press that down, and then this guy comes on out. He is almost the full length of the barrel, threaded on the end for attachment to your tool. And then if we push this guy back in, we have a notch that's going to allow it to click into place. That is extremely handy for the soldier. No muss, no fuss. Now, if I bring this guy down a little bit, we'll see that we have our lower barrel band, which has been reinforced with a screw set through. If I flip that over, that reinforcement goes, let me get that bolt out of the way. The reinforcement goes all the way through. And then at the bottom here, we see we have an underside sling swivel, which is trying to stay out of the way of a whole unique assembly. The wire monopod, which is a single foot made out of a single wire that's wrapped around in a fun shape and back in on itself, hinged so that it can pivot all the way to 90 degrees and then allow you to prop up your rifle. This was apparently a carryover from another recent rifle program. What resulted was the Type 97 Sniper with a 2.5 magnification scope. Still chambering 6.5mm, this was a modification of the Type 38, which included, at least initially, a wire monopod to provide mobile stability while remaining as light as possible. Moving further down, we see our half-length handguard that gets just through our mid-band, and then we have our long fuller, otherwise known as the finger rest. This gives you a number of positions to choose from. Not bad. If I flip this guy up, we get our ladder sight. In the current folded position, this aperture, which is a little hard to see at this angle, but I assure you there's a hole through there. Looks a lot like that hole there. As a matter of fact, hold on. There, now you can see it. All right, put that back down. That aperture is zeroed for 300 meters, and then we have a climbing ladder all the way up to a marked 1,700. Now, you may be curious about what's going on here. Unique to the Type 99 are a set of anti-aircraft sights which can be flipped down to provide rough guidance on leading an aircraft. They are measured out in, well, I've been told nautical miles per hour, but I've also read kilometers per hour. Either way, your options were 100, 200, or 300, represented by the inside of the arm, the central notch, and the outside of the arm. To fire on an aircraft, the shooter would need to set the range on the ladder, and then estimate the speed at which the aircraft was crossing his field of vision. He would align the front and rear sights along the projected path of the aircraft, then fire as it crossed the appropriate marking. Modern collectors often mock these aircraft sights, but I don't think they were that awful. You have to understand, at the time of this rifle's adoption, Japan's #1 theater of engagement was actually in mainland China, where very slow aircraft were being fielded. Most encounters would have been daylight bombings or strafings. The tendency was to fly low and slow, giving ample opportunity for troops of Japanese soldiers to volley fire at the target. Whether this truly downed an aircraft or just encouraged it to break away sooner and miss its intended target yielded about the same benefit. All right, let's get back to our rifle. Moving down to the action proper, we'll see, well, you know what, let's take a detour. Trigger guard, trigger, fairly similar to the Type 38, method of construction a little bit different. I will say if we hit this release, our floor plate will fall free, but not entirely. It's hinged at the front so that it cannot escape. There, of course, is our accordion flat spring and our follower. I'll just go ahead and put all that back together. And easy peasy to clean, easy peasy to put back together. This is designed for service. Actually, while we're in this position, note that that notch we saw in the Type 38 is gone, replaced with a simple drain hole. These would slowly vanish over time in the later short rifles. The long rifles did not stick around long enough to really see much in the way of change. If I flip her over, we'll see there's another drain hole here underneath. Also, new to this gun, although fairly small, is a cross-bolt recoil lug. This is a piece of metal set into the wood stock across, which is designed to distribute some of that recoil force to prevent it from just sort of driving all the way to the rear of the action and piling up where it fits in a sort of rounded shape. You know what? There's our deep tang. Getting this cut exactly perfect every time is difficult, and even when you do, the wood will slowly wear, and when that wears, this cross screw is going to batter up against that, bend, deform, whatever. This is very common in like old American lever guns and things like that. You guys are used to seeing this if you're a collector. The recoil lug helps to prevent some of that. So while we're here, by the way, deep tang top and bottom, just like we'd expect from a Nambu style rifle. Now looking down from on top, we can tell that this is a dust cover I stole off of a different gun. This is actually from my own personal collection. I just wanted to make sure that I had the appropriate hardware on the rifle because it was intended to be issued with this cover. That works, of course, automagically with our bolts. So every time the bolt goes back, the cover goes back, and every time it goes forward, the cover goes forward. It would probably make a little less rattly sound if it had been the original to this particular rifle. The difference in the finish also tells me that this gun probably... Actually, I really can't tell for sure what's going on with the finish on this gun. There's a couple little mysteries about it. This is on loan from Lock, Stock, and Barrel, by the way. Send them our thanks. But as much as it's kind of dark, despite being dinged on, I wonder if someone just did sort of a humidity surface level re-blue, like conversion, because it does have a correctly strawed spring here on the bolt release. The earliest of these guys, under 10K for Toyo and 3K for Nagoya loosely, had straw finished parts in a number of places. And I do kind of see that here, so a bit of a mystery. It also, if we look closely, and the camera may fight this, appears to have been double struck at some point, and even these numbers seem to have a removed and replaced serial number underneath. I do not cover the specific history of any one rifle. This sort of mystery is better fit for the guys who exclusively collect these rifles. We're just doing an overview. Now, if we move further down the stock, we'll see that it is indeed a two-piece like we'd expect. That is held in place by the screws for the butt plate and the screw coming up through the front of this lower infantry-style sling swivel, just right at the bottom. And the butt plate is a cup design, no trap door, fairly deeply set on the stock. From this angle, you can see that the entire lower assembly is one piece. Tang, trigger guard, all the way up to this front where it meets the hinge for our floor plate like we saw. Also, while I have it here, I might as well remind you guys that our follower has also been simplified in construction from the previous rifle. With the action open, we have a clip guide right here, which means we have a stripper clip. Early examples were brass. This one is, of course, steel from later on. And I'm told, but cannot quite confirm, that this hole right here indicates that this was designed specifically for the 7.7, whereas if we have this older brass clip that I happen to have without the hole, this should have been for a 6.5. They do seem to feed as well for those cartridges. So this does well with 6.5, this does well with 7.7. Although, and they seem to do okay either way. All right, while we're in this position, let's go ahead and talk about that beautiful safety that we saw carry over from the Type 38. Just push and turn. Oop, push and turn, and we're in place. Now, you may notice, unlike the earlier Type 38, this has been fitted with a notch at the rear to indicate the position instead of a tab sticking out. This meant that you could make this out of a round piece, easier to turn, and just go ahead for an indicator. It's not like that the old system really came up and truly blocked the sight anyway. It works just the same, can't fire, can't open up unless we push and turn back, and then we're ready to rock and roll. Now, coming from the Type 38, I want to make a little bit of a comparison that you can see. So let's get these guys into place. And just, you know, there's a number of simplifications. I don't want to compare it to both rifles both times because I have to drag both of these around. But just for the visuals on this one, look at the bolt stop / bolt release. We have the screw coming in from the top, easier to assemble instead of worrying about it from underneath and taking the whole gun apart to get at it. It's obviously machine cut, much more straightforward and square than this guy. The flat spring on the side used to be rounded over at the back, all the way to the front, and then round at the front. Now, rectangle, just fit it on in there. All this niceness and hand fitting is gone. The checkering that was at the top of here, gone. We just have a thicker lip so you can get a hold of it better anyway. This gun, in many ways, if you start to really take it apart, does this compared to that all the way through. Since we're talking about the stop, we'll just go ahead and pull that out. And that'll allow us to remove our dust cover. And let me show you some more features of this rifle. And on the topic of dust covers, you can see at the rear of the old Type 38, there was a riveted reinforcement. That guy is gone. This just follows the bolt, simpler construction, less work. With the Type 38 here and the Type 99 up here, we can see that this tab is no longer there. See, big old guy, nothing. Well, there's a nubbin. This is enough to act as a sort of extra safety at the root of the bolt handle, as does here. However, by deleting that, yeah, we save some operation and we get to recycle some of that metal, but to be honest with you, you're losing something, because on this guy, as you come down and turn the bolt, this curvature is supposed to theoretically help you with the cock on close. It's supposed to give you some pressure forward by converting it from downwards to forward. In this case, it's gone. I will say, to my arm in a hurry, I don't really notice the difference. It seems to be a very little tiny bit of quality of life that can frankly go if it speeds up manufacture. Now, up at the front of the receiver, we still have our Imperial Common, the chrysanthemum seal of the Emperor, and we have 99 type or model. This gets translated either way. A lot of people argue about it. It doesn't really matter. We know what we mean when we say it. If this had been surrendered at the end of the war under certain conditions, this would have been struck out, ground off, whatever the case may be. Looking at our bolt, we have that lovely elongated oval handle. We have a rotating / non-rotating. So in other words, this rotates because the bolt wants to rotate and this wants to stay still. So in the action, this would be a non-rotating extractor. We have symmetrical front locking lugs, wide set and shallow in order to do a little bit better than the Mauser. We have that same out of battery safety point. And you can see we're split on this side on the left lugs, just like on the previous rifle. This is so that our ejector can pass through and strike the back of our casing. Always conscious of case failures, we have a lovely little vent hole here that would go ahead and vent this into an appropriate channel, and then again is backed up by the fact that this big old shield protects the shooter's eye. This lug, by the way, is what keeps the bolt from being able to rotate when in lock. And then from here, I think we just need to go ahead and take her apart, which again, just like before, push, turn, release. Striker comes out with its pin inside, or with its spring inside, and Type 38, Type 99, and you can see an exterior difference. And I say exterior because that same channel exists in this bolt, but it was broached from the inside out. In this case, they've allowed themselves the opportunity to go ahead and cut it right from the outside, making it a little easier and faster to do. This would actually become something that might go the other way in the future. At the front, we can see, yeah, the profile of the firing pin tip has changed significantly, presumably to add more strength. Now this breech face looks a little shiny, especially in a little circle right there. And on another manufacturer's, the whole breech face might look shiny. But in both cases, that would be a chromium-faced bolt. This has been plated in order to resist salts and therefore corrosion and wear. The same is true of the bore on this rifle, although that's very difficult to show you on camera. I'm giving it my very best effort. Can you see the shiny ring at the edge of the larger muzzle ring? Yeah, that's chrome all the way down. And of course it's meant to resist salts and corrosion, but also in this case it does provide a hardened surface that also resists wear. Now all these changes sure save time and money, even when not fewer in parts, the operations were easier and the raw materials cheaper. Even so, the mechanical operation of this rifle is not really material different from the Type 38. So normally, we would not have our own little film about it because you could reference the previous lesson. However, it has been a very long time since that lesson, and I think we need an updated look at how this thing works. So we brought in Bruno, and we have a feature presentation for you.
Many features of Nambu's rifles were borrowed from the Mauser. This includes loading via stripper clip. 5 rounds are thumbed into the staggered, flush magazine. The last round presses against the follower, which sits atop a now compressed accordion flat spring. This will continue to feed rounds vertically as we strip them into the chamber by working the bolt. Presently, our bolt is locked and ready to fire. This is accomplished with a set of symmetrical front locking lugs, which are turned into grooves in the receiver. While similar in layout and construction to the Mauser, these are made wider and shorter for more strength. Behind the left locking lug is an auxiliary supporting lug. This is meant to stabilize the bolt during operation. As we work the bolt back and forth, the left locking lug is sometimes poorly supported by the left receiver groove. This lug keeps engagement at those moments. The auxiliary lug also engages the spring-loaded bolt stop. This prevents the bolt from exiting the rear of the receiver. This arrangement prevents damage to the locking lug, which in some previous rifles would cause stiffening and, eventually, jamming of the action. Along the right side of the bolt is a full-length Mauser extractor. This arrangement is strong, stable, and provides a controlled feed. As we bolt forward, the next round in the magazine is stripped by the bolt face. Its rim rises into the space between the bolt face and the extractor. This means from the moment the cartridge leaves the magazine, it is now controlled by the bolt. This prevents accidental double feed. As the bolt turns into lock, the extractor fits into a groove. As the bolt is withdrawn, the non-rotating extractor pulls the casing from the chamber. This is dragged along until it strikes the ejector. This shares a spring with the bolt stop and travels in a groove cut in the left-hand lugs. The ejector flicks the case from the action. The firing pin is rather unique. The core functionality is just like any other, though its coil spring is set inside its hollow rear. As we bolt forward, the firing pin's lower lug snags on the sear, causing it to retract relative to the bolt body. Pulling the trigger releases the firing pin to strike the primer, discharging our round. As we bolt open, the pin is retracted slightly by a cam in the bolt body. In a major departure from the Mauser, Nambu has fitted a rear cap that also serves as a gas check, and a palm-operated manual safety. The whole assembly can be pressed and turned, but we care most about the internal central rod. When pushed and turned, this rotates the firing pin clockwise. Now the pin can no longer travel forward. If we push and turn back, the pin realigns. When the firing pin rotates, its sear lug is turned into a channel in the receiver. From this position, it cannot be released to spring forward. Turning back, it again rests on the sear. Another lug is located on the bottom of the safety's rear cap. This travels in a channel on the left side of the receiver. Pushing the safety in allows room for the lug to rotate into the channel. When released, this lug springs back into a dead end in the channel. In this position, the bolt can no longer be rotated. Simply push in and turn the other way to disengage the safety once more. Pulling the trigger accomplishes nothing. While in the locked position, a lower external lug on the safety cap prevents the bolt from being rotated. This locks the action shut. Turning the safety back allows the system to fire again. Let's get a look at that trigger group, again very Mauser-like. Our trigger is hinged to a sear assembly, with the sear lug at the rear position holding the firing pin. This teeter-totter is sprung at the front. The guide rod inside the spring serves two purposes. First, it prevents the spring from slipping sideways out of position. Second, it serves as an out-of-battery safety. The whole assembly cannot pivot if this rod cannot rise. It can only travel when in lock. At this point, a recess in the bolt body is aligned with the rod, allowing it to rise. The trigger is two-stage thanks to a pair of lumps at its top. At rest, only one is against the receiver, but as we pull, both make contact. This increases resistance and leverage, the second stage. At this point, the trigger yanks down the sear, firing the rifle. And finally, with our rifle empty, the follower rises into the path of the bolt. This blocks our forward motion and signals it's time for a reload.
I have to say, those are my favorite part of our lessons. Now, sadly, we're not permitted to pop off rounds here in the classroom, so we've pre-filmed a little demonstration by our teacher's assistant, May. Now, while it's fun to see this rifle in action, we haven't actually wrapped up the story of its adoption, because if you recall, this all began with an attempt to introduce a 7.7mm cartridge. We left off with the Type 97 machine gun cartridge, which wasn't quite what they wanted for their infantry rifle. Through a series of experiments in parallel with their rifle development, this cartridge was modified. They opted for a lighter 182.6 grain bullet. While the powder was still smokeless, it was changed from a cordite-like tubular shape to square flake. Unfortunately, the muzzle velocity listed is based on the short rifle, not the long. I'm actually unsure of the exact muzzle velocity for our rifle today. This was adopted alongside the rifle as the Type 99 cartridge. While not quite our topic for today, the Japanese Army would eventually standardize on the 12.1mm rim of the Type 97 and Type 99 cartridges. These would still work in older hardware and allowed for mixed use during emergencies going forward. Now let's talk production of our long rifle. Once his prototype work was finished, Iwashita Kenzo was sent to Germany to study methods of mass manufacture, not just for rifles but also machine guns. The Type 99 long rifle was only produced at two facilities, one in what is now Kasugai and the other in Fuchu, Hiroshima. Trial manufacture began before adoption. As early as January of 1940, this was assigned to the Nagoya Arsenal, which had been established in 1923. A facility was spun up mostly during 1938 and 1939 in the neighboring village of Torimatsu, with the goal to produce some 30,000 units every single month. In 1943, however, this village was merged with several others to form a city now known as Kasugai. The first director of Torimatsu was the just returned Iwashita Kenzo, who was, as expected, involved in the final changes to the new rifle as the production plan was finalized. As with the prototypes, Iwashita focused on eliminating as many hand-fit operations as possible, striving for truly interchangeable parts and almost exclusively machine manufacture. You can recognize a Torimatsu Type 99 long by checking the icon located to the right of the serial number on the left side of the receiver. Next up, a line was spun up in Hiroshima under the auspices of the Kokura Arsenal. A private company took on production of the Type 99. Established in 1920, this had been a cork factory, but had diversified by the latter 1920s, becoming Toyo Kogyo Company Limited. This was their logo at the time. However, during the mid-1930s, Toyo Kogyo branched into vehicle production. Their trademark from that enterprise would eventually come to replace the company's original core name decades after our story today. You might recognize it. It's Mazda, still an automotive manufacturer today. Back in 1939, they were Toyo Kogyo and were geared up to produce the Army's new rifle. Initial production followed in 1940 or perhaps early 1941. Later that same year is really when full-scale production got underway. Toyo Kogyo production can be recognized by this combination of logos on the left wall of the receiver, after the serial number. The first is the stacked cannonballs marking of the Kokura Arsenal, which oversaw Toyo Kogyo, represented by their own symbol icon stamped behind the arsenal. Ultimately, manufacture of the Type 99 long rifle was extremely short-lived. Now, this wasn't from any particular failure of the arm itself. Instead, in trying to resolve the carbine question, the Japanese Army had discovered, perhaps a little late, what other nations had already realized around the world. A universal short rifle served everyone well enough and produced good precision at less weight and lower material consumption. Basically, in just a few months, the short rifle had superseded the long rifle. So, production was suspended in March of 1941, and our two factories spent a few weeks transitioning to short rifle production. They would be joined by others through to the end of the Second World War, but that's actually a story for, well, our next lesson, as there will be quite a few changes as that conflict raged on. It's estimated that a total of 38,000 or so Type 99 long rifles were produced before the manufacture was halted. Only 8,000 of these came from Nagoya Arsenal's Torimatsu factory, with the bulk and balance being from Kokura's Toyo Kogyo subcontractor. Like other nations, Japan would keep their serial number creep under control by running 100,000 unit blocks before adding a serial prefix. This Heian period poem, known as Iroha, contains each character of the Japanese phonetic alphabet just one time, a perfect pangram. As such, it became the basis for an alphabetical order. As displayed here, we're using the katakana characters, as Japan has two phonetic alphabets. Now, neither company actually hit 100,000 units, so neither had to do a rollover. However, Toyo Kogyo was assigned the 35th character as a prefix right from the beginning of their production. So all of their long rifle serials are preceded by the character Te. Nagoya, first to the gate, did not use a prefix for the first 100K. Alright, I think this is a good stopping point for us now. We will hear more about the Type 99, and we'll see what's generally imagined when you hear that name in our very next lesson. For now, however, let's go ahead and rearrange our seats and bring May up for her opinion on firing the Type 99 long rifle. Alright, we have May.
Hi.
And we have our Type 99 long.
We do.
Which is an unusual rifle to come across. I mean, most people don't know that these exist.
What? In the community, I feel like this is a pretty big collector's piece.
Guys who collect Japanese rifles know this gun. However, those who just sort of casually collect World War II might not have known that this actually existed. They're thinking service rifles, and for them, service rifles are ones that were in action overwhelmingly.
Okay.
So
the Type 38 might be something they're more familiar with.
True. Oh, they're far more likely to they're actually more likely to think this is a Type 38 at first glance.
Okay.
But, you know, with the internet, with people talking more, it is more commonly known, but still a very odd piece to come across, and certainly more interesting for us because it lets us tell the story of the Type 99 in an order that kind of makes sense to how they did it. To be honest with you, without being insulting, it feels like the Type 99 program, which started with this long rifle and ultimately ends up with a short rifle, was like 10 to 20 years too late.
Huh, okay.
It's very odd how long it took Japan to get around to this when they're normally kind of trying to keep up with the rest
times,
of the world. Yeah.
with the development. And no, it turns out they wanted to hold on to the 38 for so long, they went, I guess we got to change things up at some point.
Right. All right, so you've actually shot this piece. Let me go
Yes.
ahead and put it back in your hands, though.
Ooh, watch out for
And
your stand.
when you first, well, they don't matter much. When you first handle it, what comes to mind? What are you thinking about?
Well, instantly, it's very Arisaka. I'm not going to lie. And that I feel that
Excuse
narrow...
me, this is Kijiro Nambu's work?
I understand that, but this...
Backed up by Kenzo Yoshida.
If I closed my eyes, I would just, based on the thinness of the stock alone, I would know it's an Arisaka. Because that's something we've experienced, the Type 38, and like I said previously...
Oh, the Type 38 is a Nambu rifle?
Okay, I see you're going to continue to make these points.
I'm actually kind of determined to change this. There's a few things about the Japanese rifles that bother me.
Okay.
One, everything gets called an Arisaka, even though only the Type 30 is really an Arisaka.
All right.
Arguably, the Type 35 is a hybrid.
That is an unusual hybrid.
Yeah. Then Kijito Nambu, for some reason, we always spell his name with an M, but it's an N. Like,
wait.
In the way we...
Nambu is not Nambu, he's Nanbu?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, think about Japanese phonetic alphabet. It's Nanbu. It doesn't work. They don't have a solid M.
I don't know why. Whenever I've seen it spelled in textbooks even, they put
Oh,
it as
no, it's
Nanbu.
still... The community's stuck on it. I don't... There are things about collecting Japanese that refuse to change even with updated information, and I'm not really sure why. I personally feel that the Type 38 is a Nambu rifle, and then I believe that the Type 99 is a Nanbu rifle as updated by Iwashita for another cartridge and for more refined manufacture.
Sure.
So it's kind of hard to say. It's almost like a Nanbu rifle gone back to commission is what this is, if that makes sense.
Kind of, but...
Anyway, I'm sorry.
No,
so
this is
it's
a
definitely
long rant.
it's definitely a Japanese rifle. Let's go with that.
All right. But yes, closing my eyes, that thinness is really what pulls it forward for me. Interesting, okay. But it has got some good length to it.
Can you feel it in the wood too, by the way? You're talking about the thinness.
In terms of just like the density of the wood itself?
Right.
I mean, I would expect it to feel lighter then if that was the case, but it actually does feel quite dense as a piece.
Well, it's a large steel infantry rifle, but the stock wood itself, I don't know how to explain this, but for me, when I get a hold...
Like a hollowness almost?
Yeah, when I get a hold of wood...
I kind of do get a hollowness if you feel it.
It's a less dense stock. We talked about how it's a two-piece because of this. And then the lacquer finish, the urushi as we call it,
that is very smooth.
It stands out to the hand right away.
Like a polish feel versus a rougher finish.
And there's something about it that is inherently Japanese. Like you just feel it. I also noticed it on the Thai Mausers. They also have that sense of being Japanese made, not made by the West.
Sure.
So I'm agreeing with you as long.
Okay, yeah, just as long as we're in the same place. Balance point, it's just ahead of the mag, so that's actually not too bad. Pretty decent. The length is longer than I would like, but for an infantry rifle of its time, not that unusual, actually. The action, again, I'm very... Nambu, I guess, or Arisaka.
Yeah, we're going with Nambu.
Okay, we're going to go with Nambu with this one. I love the shape. I always have been a fan of it. I'm not sure what they typically use for the collectors.
I think some people just say plum.
It doesn't really seem plum. This is a cherry tomato for me. I don't know anyone else out there. This is cherry tomato size. The action, is it mostly cock on close or entirely cock on close?
So these rifles sit in between cock on open and cock on close to a degree. When you open them up, they do recess the firing pin.
A little bit, right?
Yes, and almost as far as I know, every military rifle does do that much. I feel as if this gets just a little more out of it, just a bit further, but...
So you like 15% cock on open, 85% cock on close, or more than that for...
It's probably more like 10 and 90. I mean, It really is like mostly cock on close, but...
But I will say, for a cock on close, it feels surprisingly stiff. Like, it feels like there's actually a lot of weight going into it.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of resistance on these guns, and there's something about the angle of attack that just never feels right to me. Not on the shoulder and not at the hip.
Now, working the action itself, though, very smooth.
Right.
Like, very clean. Nothing snagging. Even with the shield, I'm sorry.
Dust cover.
Dust cover, thank you. Even with the dust cover, it's still, like, it actually worked very smooth. And we've seen on some pieces, especially the Thai... rifles that we shot where the dust cover really just kind of hung up and got in the way. No, they've always been very nice on Arisakas. But otherwise, very clean looking, very smooth looking, very Nambu looking. Let's go with that.
Coming off the Type 38, does anything stand out as uniquely different, like come to the eye?
I mean, obviously the monopod. That's not something I'm used to.
Just hanging off the front.
Now, the thing is, we don't really do a lot of practice with bipods here for this series, which I can understand how that is a little bit unusual because that means that we're not exercising the entire piece. We're really only just showing the shooting segments with me standing. So that can be a little bit, I unusual, I guess,
Right.
for a gun review, essentially.
You did not get a chance to shoot the monopod.
No, I didn't, but I'm just going to tell you right now, it looks very flimsy. And feeling it, like there's a lot of kind of give to it that I expect it would probably not be the most sturdy monopod I could come across.
So, in theory, you're supposed to use it prone. I have found it seems to be very tall, even for me.
It is pretty tall looking, yeah.
It shoulders up well for someone my size laying prone. That seems weird, because your average Japanese soldier would be much shorter than I am.
So then how are they doing it?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't been able to get...
Period photos on that one?
For this lesson, I did try to dig in and find either primary source instructions or photos, and they may still be out there and I might have just missed them. But I haven't seen a lot in the way of the utility point for that monopod.
Okay.
Now, it might have been buried in with the history of the Type 97, which is really where it comes from. But again, we work on a 2-week rotation for this, so I did what I could. I have a feeling that the intent was to allow you to flex somewhat on it to get it to brace up. I also have a theory that is a pet theory, but I haven't been able to prove it out in documentation yet, which is that the monopod has a pair of rails, wire rails, that run underneath the forend, and I suspect that they may have been used to allow you to set that barrel down on surfaces that would be not great for the wood, and just anchor the gun without shredding your stock. Because it's, for as light as these stocks are, it's very rare to find damage up underneath that sort of forend of a Type 99 that still has its wire monopod. It seems natural that a soldier would go ahead and set the metal down instead of the wood if they're trying to take care of the rifle.
I mean, yes.
But in the heat of a battle, I doubt anybody would care that much. They'd get it where it needed to go. But in general, most rifles aren't in battle. They're just being carried around and set down on things. So
For the most part,
it may have been a longevity thing as well.
It's true.
Overall, though, I find it to be an odd piece. It makes it very hard to get enfilade or defilade. It's very strange.
And then the other major difference that you would spot probably pretty easily would be the rear sight being different.
Yes.
Obviously, we've gone from, is it a V-notch ladder, I want to say, on
Right.
the previous, and then this one is obviously the, shoot, I'm forgetting the term for it.
The aperture?
Aperture, thank you. I was trying to remember the term
Today's
for
the day
aperture.
for that.
I know. However, I will say, I think I prefer the aperture sight. I wish the sight itself was closer to my eye, and that
Right.
would be the better situation for it, but it's still a pretty clear read and pretty rapid read as well.
Yeah, so this has a short ladder with rear aperture either folded or lifted. The original sight was a notch folded or lifted with a longer ladder. I mean, look at the comparison.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Now, granted, they're not sighted the same way.
And then I can't go after Aircraf with that one at all. This one, however,
The
wings.
Aircraft wings don't stand out until you really start looking at it, but they are pretty weird.
They are quite unusual.
Would you have guessed what they were for just by seeing it?
Honestly, probably not. If anything, I would have thought it was some sort of windage adjustment, some rudimentary version of that, and
Yeah.
I would have been completely wrong.
I mean, you're not wrong in a sense. It's a means of leading. So,
But for its actual purpose for aircraft, I would have never. That would have not occurred to me. Not really, because I can't say we have experienced that version of this style of sight to date.
it's still pretty fun. I actually made the graphic that we used for this lesson many years ago.
Oh yeah, that was early on.
Yeah. Now, in terms of weight or balance or just general feel, does it stand out that much from the Type 38? We have a fairly early one here.
Well, here, let me set this down, and if you don't mind, I'll take a look real quick. I honestly can't say I feel all that much of a difference.
On average, the long Type 99 should be slightly lighter, but...
Is it? The 38 does feel a little bit lighter, so I'm not really sure how to feel about
Well, to be fair,
that.
it's also a lot older and more beat up, and within
There is
production
that.
batches, who knows? But on average, supposedly, they saved a little weight.
Okay.
I find that hard to believe, other than maybe just the fact that the inner diameter of the barrel made it so that you had a thinner barrel overall, because that monopod has to have weight.
I personally want to weigh these two examples to see, because it does actually truly feel like that might be slightly heavier.
Oh, this might be. I mean, on a
Yes.
case-by-case basis, who knows? As a matter of fact, the Type 38s were much more hand-fit than the Type 99, so who knows what the variation within these guys really is.
That's fair.
Now, you go ahead, and we've looked at it briefly.
Yes.
Now let's talk about actually handling it and shooting it. So we've got a loader up, we've got a fire.
Loading was pretty smooth. Stripper clip feed. I can't say that hung up any, and it took perfectly for our first take on that one, so that was actually pretty great. Lining up our sights, we talked about it. I actually do like that aperture sight paired with the barleycorn front. That was a very clean read, very rapid, fast acquisition read.
A lot of people complain about that sight, by the way.
Is it because it's so far forward for the rear sight? Because I can understand how moving it forward like that, you're just not getting, it's looking busier, and on top of it, it's just not as clean of a read. So if it were further back a little bit, it would make a major difference. But
or a lot.
Where exactly would you put it on here further back is my question.
The dust cover would mean that you would need essentially an overbridge, almost like a charging bridge on a Lee Enfield if you wanted to put a rear aperture.
And then talk about a busy rear sight. That would take up a lot of visual room there.
Yeah. It is very odd. There's only a handful of rifles in military service that have a midpoint rear aperture, and it has a number of disadvantages. First of all, when the aperture is that far away from you, it's small. It's just a little circle in your field of vision, and you can align that little barleycorn front sight, the triangle within the circle, but you have to focus to find it to some degree.
I honestly didn't think I had to focus all that bad on it personally. I thought it acquired very quickly, and my grouping was very tight as well.
So that's the other thing, is people who have actually shot this at range. Actually, I believe our buddy Henry over at 9 Hole Reviews has shot a rifle that was configured this way.
I think he did.
And he did not care for the sight when he first laid hands on it dry, and when he started using it, he found, oh, this has value in a sort of rapid acquisition way that the V-notch does not. Now, it does cloud a bit for some of your lateral view around either side of the sight because it does take up a good bit of what you're seeing.
I could see that.
Because of the thickness of the aperture. However, it's not all that much of a loss compared to just a V-notch that's sticking into a bar that eats up a lot of width as well. So there are advantages to it. It's just not very natural. And of course, I believe that having an aperture set all the way to the rear is inherently better, what most people would call like a ghost ring nowadays.
Yes, I would also concur.
Yeah, because it's more natural to just sort of go ahead and center. I do know some people that prefer the midpoint aperture because for whatever reason they're bad at centering from a wide open rear aperture right up against the eye.
Oh, that's interesting. I can't say I've encountered anyone. That must be just a personal base by base. That depends on the person.
Yeah, and it may even be that it's easier to train on something like that when you're trying to incrementalize what you're doing to an audience.
Sure. I actually still love the safeties on these. You can palm them on and off, which is actually fantastic for less fine motor control, more major gross action. If I was wearing gloves or I wasn't able to use my fingers for any reason, that would be fantastic, no matter what. The trigger on this one, there's a moderate amount of take up, I want to say, but no real weight to it. And then you hit, obviously, the cliff wall. There is a little bit of creep, but it's barely there, and boom, there goes the trigger.
And how was that break on it?
You know, if I was going from 6.5 to 7.7, I could understand a little bit of the Japanese having a bit of concern on that. We're going, ooh, this feels stoutier. This is a heartier meat sauce.
Oh, recoil. I'm sorry, I said break.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said recoil.
No. I was talking about because you said
the break was very
clean.
clean.
You said the distance in the creep was low, but you didn't actually say how heavy.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy creep, I want to say. It's pretty hefty.
Okay.
There's no accidentally firing that one. Let's go with that. There's intention behind it.
Now, in our case-by-case example, the Type 38 that we have here has a not great trigger, but it's probably wear. After the creep, it tends to snag. It's almost like there's a bit of a bevel.
A gumminess, maybe?
No, it's almost like it's gotten a burr in it. And then
it's quite old.
And then it kind of goes. That one felt more deliberate to me.
Yes, much more intentional.
And then, I guess now we should get to recoil. I'm sorry, you were saying 7.7 had more of a punch.
Yeah, it's got a little more of a punch to it, but it's not going to be anything like 8mm Mauser. It's under that range, I would say. So it's not unmanageable, but it's certainly stouter than what I would expect when I'm experiencing the Arisaka, Nambu styles.
So this is tricky because you're essentially shooting something close to 303. I'm fairly close. We can take a look at the chart, actually. And then what you got it on is a rifle that's much larger than a short magazine Lee Enfield and not too far from the weight. So it should be fairly controllable. However, if all of your experience and training was on a 6.5 out of a monster rifle, well, the Japanese cartridge is extremely mild.
Yes.
And very pleasant. That's something we complimented way back in our old lessons.
Easily handle it all day.
Right. Almost no muzzle flash on a barrel this length for that cartridge. Very, very good. Unfortunately, there is the fact that it doesn't hit quite as hard on target. So in that regard,
that is very correct.
Does that make you uncomfortable shooting 6.5 Type 38 cartridge versus this honkin' 7.7? Does that provide some more confidence to you?
In general, yes, it does. However, I guess it would entirely depend on the situation in which I was in for me to be handling either of one of those cartridges. Because if I was in a situation where penetration or impact wasn't as critical, sure, like open terrain essentially. Or if I was worried about possibly having to go through terrain into the said target after that.
Yeah, penetration of foliage without deviation.
Definitely 7.7 would be an upgrade there.
Yeah, it's going to be a little more stable because of its own mass and inertia. I guess if I had to choose the two in terms of fighting, I would ultimately choose the 7.7 because the ballistic advantages coming over from Spitzer kind of wash out the advantages of the 6.5 at that time. However, this is not a rifle that I would not choose to defend myself with. I think
I could see that.
6.5, especially in massed fire, really I doubt is making that big of a difference. I ultimately feel that the Japanese made this decision as a logistics decision over just a performance decision. The rifle 6.5 really stuck around for a very long time. It seems like, hey, why are we making all these different kinds of... I mean, because you think about it, your equipment's got to change and things like that. You get a lot of, even if you don't have the exact same load and the exact same dimensions on every single cartridge, the more you can bring those into line, the better off you are. And honestly, if the Army hadn't sort of dickered and done semi-rim and then rimless and then all these little changes, we probably would have seen what we saw in other armies in which you have the exact same cartridge between machine gun and rifle, except for bullet weight, kind of jacket, and powder load, which is normal. Most, a lot of people make fun of Japanese for having a million different cartridges, but it's like, not really. I mean, they stuck themselves because they did it so incrementally, but in the end, where they ended up just before the war with the West, they were basically where everybody else was. We've got these two cartridges that are almost identical and have slightly different load data for machine gun or rifle.
Incremental changes for vast improvements.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how much that too is the Japanese conservatism and their notoriousness for not being able to make large changes because you have to shove upwards, and it's not easy to shove upwards in their system.
I could see that.
So in the end, we end up with Type 38 plus P plus. So
yeah, okay.
Do you have any final thoughts on it? I mean, we've covered everything in terms of shooting that I can see stands out. Like, is there anything else relevant to the discussion compared to this guy right here?
I'm trying to think if there's anything we possibly left out on this one, but I guess the only comments I have left are essentially, I feel like I'm not going to be getting the range I necessarily need out of this one because I wish it was a shorter rifle. I feel like that would be a lot easier for me to carry it around on the daily basis if I was just able to tote it on my back a lot easier.
Yeah, that's true. Especially being an over-shoulder, old-style infantry rifle, it's not going to be a universal fit, which is what we're talking about next time.
And I'm assuming for aircraft use, maybe that length does come in handy, but...
Well, actually, that's a good point. This is something we weren't able to cover in the episode, but the muzzle velocity that we showed early, even for the 303 versus the 7.7, is fairly good because those are both short rifles that muzzle velocity is measured off of. I could not find an accurate muzzle velocity for this rifle.
Really?
Now, what I could do in theory is get a perfectly same weight bullet, which I can't seem to find, and load it to exactly the same muzzle velocity out of a Type 99 as expected. Then once I have all that proven out, I could take that and put it in this rifle, and then we could get something close to it. But I'm going to tell you, powder doesn't always behave the same. Even if you get that, even if I had the muzzle velocity right in this length of barrel, switching over to another length, different powders will get different results, and I don't have original Japanese ammunition, and even if I did, it's now aged significantly, which changes things. So unless we got a batch and we could sample it, and we found that it had the correct muzzle velocity out of Type 99, and then we took that same original ammo and put it in the Type 99 long, and then
Prof, calm down.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
I get a lot of questions from you guys about exactly this, and many people get upset at me for saying, well, it can't easily be done. And they're like, what do you mean? And scientific proofing takes a little extra effort. Now, since we've really gotten this done for conversation,
I think so.
I want to make sure to put out a little bit of thanks. So the rifle that you are holding on to at the moment is not ours here in the classroom.
Okay.
This one was a loan taken from our friends over at Lock, Stock, and Barrel.
Ah, yes.
So if you were to look them up, you would find things like this.
This is an old loan that we have had quite on hand for some time now.
Yes, before we rebuilt the classroom,
Yes.
This was already sent over to us, so they have been extremely patient. We would really appreciate it if you would reach out to them and tell them thank you for providing this opportunity, because they are the first commercial enterprise to work with us on a loan system, which means we will be able to borrow things, many more things for you guys to learn about, and then send them on back.
Many things that would normally be very difficult for us to have on hand locally. So this is a huge step in progress for us. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this relationship.
Yes.
And then other than that, any final thoughts?
Just happy I got to experience it. Glad they were willing to work with us and give us this opportunity to show all of it to you.
It really is a beautiful rifle.
It is. Great condition.
Cool. All right. With that resolved, I believe class is dismissed. Y'all have a good one.
Night.
Now, this lesson was made possible with a lot of help from our students over at Patreon and Subscribestar, which is where all the resources are. I also have to give a rundown of friends who made it possible to cover the Type 99 at all. Wolf did a lot of work helping me cite original sources and bringing me translations, some of which came from his friend Austin Adachi. My personal friend Brandon and my personal friend Tom both lent rifles over to the program and arranged for me to be able to have additional images. That was absolutely lovely. I really appreciate all of you for chipping in and allowing this to be possible. All right, y'all. See you next time.